The recovery after a depressive episode has been as equally exhausting, if not just as exhausting as being depressed. I still think we're not having enough conversations about what happens when you get out of a depressive episode. No one's talking about what happens after because honestly, it's such a shit show. Welcome to another creative podcast because apparently the internet needed another podcast hosted by a creative person. I'm Janelle, a late 20s creative navigating life one lesson, one dream, and one existential crisis at a time. Think of this less like a podcast and more like a long voice memo from a friend who's probably asking the same questions you are. So, let's get into it. Hello everybody. Welcome to or back to the podcast. This week we're getting deep. We're getting a little bit deeper than usual because today's topic is regarding mental health. More specifically, we're talking about what happens after you come out of a depressive episode and what it means to live again. This is my quick trigger warning for anyone who may be sensitive to the following topics, such as suicide, suicidal ideation, talks of depression, and all that deep stuff. But it's all very real and it's a conversation I want to have with you guys. I just want to give anyone a heads up if this is not a conversation they are in a headspace to have. With that being said, let's dive in. While we live in a time where talking about mental health is not unheard of, it's not weird, it's not taboo, I still think we're not having enough conversations about what happens when you get out of a depressive episode. I've always called this part of dealing with depression as my waking up phase. And I think part of this also comes from the fact that as an impressionable teen, I did read a book that explored a character who dealt with depressive episodes, and they described it as waking up, and I just never looked back because I just felt like that is the best way to describe what it's like to come back to life. You are waking up again. Ever since I was young and dealt with depression, I would always describe my depressive episodes as literally living in a fog. Everything was just so hazy in my mind. My thoughts were very foggy. I struggled to remember things. I struggled to even come up with my own thoughts. When I'm in a dark place, I would struggle to just really even be in the moment. I don't know if you guys have ever watched the movie Twilight, but in the second movie in that series and the second book, but we're gonna talk about the movie for a second. In the second movie, Bella's going through depression and the camera will pan around her as the seasons are changing, and that often reminds me of what it feels like when you're sitting in depression. And in the book, the way Stephanie Meyer actually described depression was she would just have months that would keep going as chapters that had nothing in them, they were just blank, there was nothing. And I feel like metaphorically that's such a beautiful way to describe what it's like to be in the pits of depression. When it comes to describing what it's like to be depressed to people who've never felt it before, I've always struggled with doing so. And I think that's a really good thing that there are people who just can't relate. There are people in my life who I will explain to them, I have depression, or I was depressed, or I am depressed. And they'd be like, I don't know what that's like. And I'm like, oh gosh. What a beautiful thing. I would never wish depression upon my worst enemies. It is just so cruel and it does not discriminate. And it's just horrible to know that there's this voice in my head that wants to make me feel the absolute worst, like I'm not worthy of being alive and that I have no purpose on this world. It really messes with you and it's such an exhausting battle, but I'm proud to say that I've lived to win another one. But what happens after? No one's talking about what happens after because honestly, it's such a shit show. The recovery after a depressive episode has been as equally exhausting, if not just as exhausting as being depressed. I remember when I was younger, these depressive episodes really messed with my life because when you're a young teenager dealing with depression, you don't really know how to manage it. And I ruined a lot of friendships. I destroyed so many relationships, all because of my depression. Like, I would just become a monster. I had no care for anyone but myself. I didn't care if I hurt people's feelings. I didn't care if I disregarded others. I simply just did not care. And then when I'd get out of it, I'd have to do a lot of cleaning up. Some friendships I was never able to reconcile. I was never able to save, and I lost friends from it. Others I've been able to luckily earn their trust back again and save the friendships and grow from my wrongdoings. And I think the only way I've actually been able to do that, though, is just, taking accountability. I think that's one of the first things that one has to actually deal with when rebuilding your life after being in a depressive episode. You're going to have to hold yourself accountable for all the things that you did when you weren't in the best mindset. And it's good because it means you can recognize that you weren't in the best place, but also it allows you to humanize others and put yourself in the shoes of others to understand that what you did was not okay. And just because you're depressed doesn't mean you can treat people like they're disposable. That was a really hard lesson for me to learn. I honestly didn't even learn that till like my mid-20s, because I almost like enjoyed being the bad guy. Like, I was okay with depression coming in and taking over my mind and letting me be this person who just didn't care. Like, it's almost like I felt like a sense of freedom with not caring. But me at my core, if you know me, you know I actually care a little too much at times. And that's kind of the downfall of it. When I am in a depressive episode for so long, I almost don't even recognize who I am. And what's slightly funny, not funny, is that I only come to this realization when I'm out of a depressive episode. Last summer, going into the fall, I went through some stuff. I felt like I was coming out of it, and I was, waking up again. And I remember I looked at my husband, we were at the store and I was buying something and we were waiting in line to pay. And I was just like, dude, I am so funny. And like, I jokingly say that, like, if no one laughs at something and I'm like, bro, I'm so funny. Why aren't you laughing? Like, it's just a thing I do. But I looked at him and I was like, dude, I have my sense of humor back. Like, I just found myself laughing so much, making so many people around me laugh. I was like, dude, I forgot how funny I was. Like, I used to take everything so seriously. And like, when you're deep down in the dumps, there's nothing that could make me laugh. I just feel nothing. I tend to go numb when I'm in depressive episodes. So feeling is something that's just way too much for me. And I am someone who feels everything. I'm very empathetic. I am the empath in people's lives because anything and everything makes me cry. I'm incredibly emotional and I love that about myself. I think it's one of the things that makes it really easy for me to connect with others, is just my ability to empathize with others and what they are feeling or going through. It's one of those things that I love most about myself and also dislike at the same time, but I like it more than I dislike it. And when I'm waking up from a depressive episode, this is one of those things that reminds me that like, I'm back. I am who I've always been. I'm becoming me again. But that's just like one little bit of normalcy that I get back out of being depressed that takes time to get to. I think when you're coming out of a depressive episode, trying to figure out who you are can either be really easy or really tough. When I was younger, it was a bit easier for me to go back to who I've always been, like after a depressive episode. I just had so much confidence in my sense of self when I was younger. And it's just because I had very distinct taste. I liked what I liked and I wore what I wore and I knew what I looked like. I had a very curated vision of myself because I was just so proud of it as a teen. Like, I was just so confident in like what I wore, what I dressed, what I looked like, how I acted, all the things. So it was really easy for me to get back into it. However, as I've gotten older, I realized I've changed. And recently I realized the things I like have changed and some things haven't, but a lot of things have. And I'd say these last 2 years, like being in my late 20s, it's been hard to remember who I am as a person when I come out of these ruts. And if I'm being honest, this last few depressive episodes I've had have been very difficult for me to come out of, because I feel like the person I was becoming was part of the reason why I kept ending up in these depressive episodes. And it was constantly gnawing at me because I started to hate who I was. And these last two episodes I've kind of dug myself out of. I've had to ask myself, like, who am I? I realized I have outgrown past versions of myself, and I was becoming this person who I don't recognize yet, who I don't know yet. And it was just so scary, because that meant if I survived this depressive episode, I was gonna have to deal with the fact that I'm not who I used to be. And for a while, my identity was so wrapped up in like all the things that I did, and I didn't have any confidence behind who I am as a person. I just felt like I was a human doer and not a human being. And that was really rough for me to come to terms with for a really long time. And, eventually I had to look in the mirror and be like, girl, who are you? And it's funny, not funny, but one of the things that helped me answer this question was cutting off all my hair. I remember at the end of December, I was just like, I feel for so long I've been hiding behind my long hair. I felt like it was just this safety net that I was hiding behind, because I could just be this person I've always been and not have to grow. Just such a weird thing. So I cut off my hair. And I never felt like a more truer version of myself. And cutting off my hair was not only something to change it up and break the norm, but when I was in college, I remember my freshman year, I was 18, turning 19, and I said, all right, by the time I'm done with schooling and I have the career that I want, I will be about like 27, 28. So I'm hoping that by then I cut all my hair off and I'm this new fresh version of myself. And oh my gosh, I ended up not being close to the person that younger me thought I was going to be. But I did turn 28. I did not make the 27 club. Thank goodness. So I said I need to keep a promise to my younger self, and I decided to cut off my hair right before turning 28. And this was a very big deal for me, because when you are in these depressive episodes, at least for me in my experience, it's hard for me to even imagine a life where I lived beyond the ages of, 18, 21, 25. 27. So every year it's my birthday, I am reminded that I live to fight another year, and my depression didn't win the battle. And I know that sounds kind of deep or morbid or very blunt, but it's a thought I have constantly. And as I get older, I'm growing, I'm changing, I'm evolving as a person. But when you're in these depressive ruts where you just don't feel like yourself, it's so hard to remind yourself who you are when you don't even know who you are. So these last few months, as I've been trying to dig myself out of a depressive episode, I've been trying to date myself. I've been trying to spend time doing different activities and different things, or things I used to love, and see if I still love them or if I don't. And just spending time getting to know myself has helped me build my life back up from the dang pits that I was in. Having this whole identity crisis, I think, is something a lot of us go through a little bit more often than we realize. But I think it's necessary, because it just reminds you that you're human and that you are going to feel things, but you're also going to have likes and interests and hobbies and goals and dreams. And that's very important when you're getting out of a dark mental space. Having hope and feeling like you can exist again and that you have purpose is so important to your mental health when you are going through it. It is very easy to feel like, what's the point? But having hope, making people laugh, enjoying things, enjoying good company, just existing for whatever reason it is enough reason to stay around. And this kind of bleeds into another topic I kind of want to cover in this whole what happens next. And when we're talking about coming out of a depressive episode, I think it's important that we talk about feeling joy again. Lately, I've been seeing some discourse online about the word anhedonia. It is the inability to feel pleasure or a loss of interest in activities you usually enjoy. Lately, I've been seeing a lot of people talk about how they feel this. And I kind of thought it was weird because although I do know that this is a symptom of having major depressive disorder or PTSD, however, I feel like when people talk about this, they're talking about it like casually, like they just always feel this, and that may be true. But today we're not talking about this in a casual way. I think this is a part of depression that a lot of people do not really talk about enough, because this is usually one of the first symptoms for me that I'm about to enter a depressive episode, or I'm just gonna be in a very dark place for a very dark time, because I have a lot of things I'm very passionate about that I love doing, and that when I stop doing them, it is scary because I'm someone who doesn't know how to not be me when I'm not doing the things that I love. So therefore, if I'm not doing the things that I love, I lose all sense of who I am and what I'm doing and where I'm going, and all sense of purpose, for lack of better terms. It's scary when you start to feel nothing, and especially when you don't feel joy, because when you get out of that depressive episode, how do you feel it again? How do you know where to find it? Luckily, I have certain things that I fall back on that I know will guarantee that I will feel something, but that's not the case for everyone, because if you don't know yourself really well, for example, I know that I love reading, and reading is a really good way to kind of bring me back to reality and, you know, ground me back into real life, even though it's kind of my escape. Anywho, the point that I'm trying to make is that if you're not that self-aware, you're probably going to be scared to move and do things. And it's like, where do I start from here? Like, how do I go back to feeling good? And I think a lot of that fear actually comes from being uncomfortable with feeling happy again after feeling so much intense despair and sadness. I know that for me, after I experience a very intense depressive episode that usually involves me feeling suicidal, I often have to have like a little pep talk with myself to like trust that the world is not going to end just because I have chosen to live again. Like, I'm allowed to feel joy. Like, I should not feel horrible about feeling better when I do feel better. It's honestly just a weird feeling happy again, because it almost feels like too good to be true. Like, am I genuinely happy? Am I laughing because I'm actually like enjoying this moment? You can so easily get in your head, especially if you're someone who overthinks everything. Like, you may not even feel like trusting of the joy that you feel because you're almost like waiting for the other shoe to drop. But I'm here to tell you that that fear is irrational, and it's not worth spending time stressing over, because you deserve to feel joy, especially after being in such a dark place. Joy is going to come, and it's going to feel weird when it does, but you shouldn't feel guilty about it, and you should just embrace the fact that you can feel again and that you don't have this numbness to you anymore. It's weird, but then eventually you will get used to it. It's just like a very weird part of the recovery, and I don't really hear a lot of people talking about this. I just remember almost feeling like guilty about being depressed when I would feel like really happy, or I'd be with someone, we'd be sharing like a happy moment. Like, I'd be like, gosh, I feel so bad that I wasn't experiencing this prior to this moment. But you can't think like that. It's like the opposite of wishful thinking. Like, just, it's not good. And being happy again is something to embrace and enjoy. Now, when it really comes down to it, I think it's important that when you're going through this in-between phase of no longer being depressed and becoming who you no longer are, that one actually thinks about the life they want to live. I really struggle with this aspect of recovering from depressive episodes. In fact, I think I've always just struggled with it, because I think for some time I was self-sabotaging, and therefore like the shoe was bound to drop at any point because I was being self-destructive. But you know, after some years of therapy and a lot of healing and, well, growth, I've learned to view rebuilding my life again after depressive episodes as something to look forward to, something to be excited about. I have to remind myself that having hopes and dreams and looking forward to things is something I should be feeling, and I should like to feel. Like I should get a little bit more used to this, because that means I've regained my will to live, and that's a great thing. That means I made it to the other side. However, it is scary. I'm currently rebuilding my life, and it's actually been so challenging. The first month I spent rebuilding my life, I was getting out of a depressive episode, and I had some tough decisions to make. One of them being like the lifestyle that I was living. It was just, I had to have a heart to heart with myself and truly ask myself, like, is this the life I want for myself? And for the first time in a long time, I was honest with myself and I said no. And that meant having to step away from everything I've ever known. And I'm no longer a stranger to dropping everything and starting fresh. I've done it plenty of times in my life, but this time I felt like I was letting everyone around me down, but I also knew that if I'm not my best self, I simply will not exist. I realized it was really important for me to remove myself from situations that just were no longer serving me. And while it was difficult, I have no regrets. I knew that when I wanted to rebuild my life, there were certain responsibilities I did not want to have anymore. There were certain environments I no longer wanted to be in. And that first month, man, I'm not gonna lie, I spent a lot of time just laying on the couch, staring at the ceiling, doom scrolling on my phone for hours, getting lost in books. I simply just did not want to be here. I wanted to still escape because I didn't want to have to deal with the aftermath of everything I had to deal with. But at some point I did have to face the music, and I've continued to face the music. I've been putting effort into things. I have been caring about things. I've been making plans for the future because I actually see one. And 2 months ago, I didn't see one. So to know that I'm currently in a place I didn't think I'd get to is very rewarding. I did not expect to get emotional talking about this. So if you hear my voice crack, I'm so sorry. Lately, I have found that in order to build the life that I want to live in, I have to embrace the fact that I care way too much about things and that I'm an empath, and that every single day I wake up is a new chance to be excited about a future I didn't think I was gonna have. I've spent hours trying to figure out what my goals are, and every day I've been trying to spend at least one bit of effort going towards one of the things I care about achieving. And they're not even like big goals either. Simply drinking water because I have a body that I'm grateful for that needs to be hydrated in this Arizona heat. Like the goals I've made towards rebuilding my life again have been so simple because I'm trying not to put as much pressure on myself to make sure I'm rebuilding my life correctly. I feel like sometimes when you are recovering from a depressive episode, you're almost scared to make the wrong move, in a sense of like making a decision that's gonna like lead you back down that rabbit hole. And I've been there. When I was 19, I was so depressed that it was terrifying. Like I ended up surviving that summer, and I remember being frozen. Like I truly had trauma from how depressed I was. I did not know how to move forward with my life, and I spent years stuck in this place physically and mentally where I just didn't know how to move on because I was so afraid to make the wrong move, and I was just paralyzed. Eventually I got out of that, but it's a thing that happened to me, and it's a fear that still sits in the back of my mind. But as I've gotten older and learned a lot, because that's a good thing, I realized that my depression is not going anywhere. It's gonna come, it's gonna go. I'm gonna feel it a lot more often than I don't. But I've chosen to accept that and take the lessons that have come with having depression, which is I am resilient. I am someone who's going to survive. I am going to get through it. It's just going to take some time, and I'm going to see the other side of it. I don't know when, but I know I will. And I know that I'm worthy of still building a life that I want to live. And that's currently where we're kind of at. I'm still getting through it. I'm still going through it, but I'm feeling hopeful. I'm feeling excited, and I'm not sure where my life will end up, but I do know that I'm going to get through it. And if you are in a depressive episode or you're getting out of one and you're like, what the hell do I do? I'm right there with you, but I'm making an effort to keep on living and to keep on going because I deserve to. And that's kind of it. I know this isn't as light as the topic as I normally cover on this podcast, but mental health is something that I want to continue to talk about and get into with you guys. So I hope this can help anyone feel heard or seen if they are going through this. If you are, I hear you, I see you, I am with you, and you've got this. This world needs you. You matter, and I'm so happy you're here. And with that being said, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.